Maria Rodriguez walked through the back door of the Grand Hotel, wearing her black uniform and white apron. She carried a heavy tray of glasses in her hands. Her feet already hurt from the long day of work, but she needed this job. The money from tonight would help pay for her music classes next month. The hotel looked different tonight. Beautiful flowers filled every corner. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling like stars. Rich people in expensive clothes talked and laughed everywhere. Maria had never seen so much money in one place before. She walked carefully between the guests, trying not to bump into anyone. Their jewelry sparkled under the lights. The women wore long dresses that cost more than Maria made in a year. The men had watches that could pay for her entire education. But Maria was not here to look at the rich people. She was here to work. She picked up empty glasses and plates. She smiled when people looked at her, even when they did not smile back. Some guests talked to her like she was not even there. Others looked right through her as if she was invisible. After 2 hours of walking and carrying heavy trays, Maria saw something that made her stop. In the corner of the big room sat a beautiful black piano. It was the most perfect piano she had ever seen. The wood was so shiny she could see her face in it. The keys were white as snow and black as night. Maria loved pianos more than anything else in the world. She had been playing since she was 6 years old. Her grandmother taught her on an old piano that was missing some keys. When her grandmother died, Maria had to practice on the broken piano at the community center. It was old and some keys did not work, but it was better than nothing. She walked closer to the piano. Her heart beat fast with excitement. She wanted to touch the keys so badly. She wanted to hear how beautiful it would sound. But she knew she could not. This piano was not for people like her. It was just for show like everything else at this party. Maria stood there looking at the piano. She imagined playing her favorite song on it. She could almost hear the music in her head. Her fingers moved a little like she was playing invisible keys. For a moment she forgot where she was. "Maria, what are you doing?" Her boss, Mrs. Johnson, appeared behind her. Mrs. Johnson was not mean, but she was always worried about everything. "Sorry." "Mrs. Johnson, I was just looking," Maria said quickly. "Well, stop looking and start working. These people pay good money for this party. We need to keep them happy," Mrs. Johnson said, but her voice was not angry. She knew Maria was a good worker. "Yes, ma'am," Maria said. She picked up her tray and walked away from the piano. But she kept looking back at it. The party got busier as more people came. Maria worked harder, carrying more trays and cleaning more tables. Her back hurt and her feet felt like they were on fire. But every time she walked past the piano, she felt a little better. During her break, Maria sat on a chair in the kitchen. The other workers talked about their families and their problems. They complained about the rich people and how they acted, but Maria did not join in. She was thinking about the piano. "You look sad, honey," said Carmen, an older woman who had worked at the hotel for many years. "What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Maria said. "I just saw a beautiful piano out there." "You play piano?" asked Carmen. "Yes, I do. I am studying music at the community college. I want to be a piano teacher someday," Maria explained. Carmen smiled. "That's a good dream. My daughter wanted to be a singer, but life got in the way." "Don't let life get in the way of your dreams," Maria nodded. She thought about her dreams every day. Sometimes they felt so far away. The music school was expensive. Her family had no money to help her. She worked 3 jobs just to pay for her classes and rent. Some days she was so tired she could barely practice. But when she sat at a piano, all her problems went away. Music was the only thing that made her feel like she could fly. When she played, she was not poor. She was not tired. She was just Maria, making beautiful sounds that filled the air. After her break, Maria went back to work. The party was getting louder now. People drank more wine and talked louder. Some of them were dancing to the music from the speakers, but the beautiful piano still sat in the corner, silent and alone. Maria watched the guests as she worked. They had everything they could want. Beautiful clothes, expensive jewelry, nice cars waiting outside, but none of them seemed to care about the piano. It was just decoration to them. They probably did not even know how to play it. This made Maria feel sad. The piano was meant to make music, not to sit quietly in a corner. It was like keeping a bird in a cage and never letting it sing. As the evening went on, Maria kept thinking about the piano. She wondered what it would feel like to play it. She wondered what songs it would sound best playing. She imagined sitting on the bench and putting her fingers on the keys. Near the end of her shift, Maria was cleaning tables near the piano again. She was alone in that corner of the room. Most guests were on the other side, talking to important people. The piano sat there waiting like it was calling to her. Maria looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then she reached out and touched one key very softly. The sound was so beautiful it almost made her cry. It was perfect. It was everything she dreamed a piano could sound like. She quickly pulled her hand away and looked around. No one had seen her, but that one note stayed in her head. It was the most beautiful sound she had heard all day. Maria knew she could not play the piano tonight. It was not her place. She was just the help. But as she finished her work and got ready to go home, she made a promise to herself. Someday she would play a piano like that. Someday she would make music so beautiful that people would stop and listen. She did not know that tomorrow would bring something she never expected. She did not know that one simple question would change everything. Tonight she was just a poor girl who loved music, working hard to make her dreams come true. As Maria walked to the bus stop, she could still hear that perfect note in her head. It gave her hope for tomorrow. David Chen sat in the back seat of his black car as it moved through the city streets. He looked out the window at the lights but did not really see them. His mind was somewhere else, thinking about the long day at his office. "We will be there in 5 minutes, Mr. Chen," said his driver, James. "Thank you, James," David said quietly. He did not want to go to this party. He never wanted to go to these parties. But his business partner always said he had to show his face at important events. "It's good for the company," his partner would say. David was 28 years old and very rich. His company made apps for phones and computers. He had started the company when he was 23 with money from his family. Now it was worth millions of dollars. People always wanted to talk to him about business and money, but David was tired of talking about business. He was tired of people who only cared about money. He was tired of wearing expensive suits and going to fancy parties where everyone pretended to be happy. The car stopped in front of the Grand Hotel. David could see the bright lights and well-dressed people going inside. He took a deep breath and got out of the car. "I will wait for you, Mr. Chen," James said. "Thank you." "This should not take too long," David replied. He hoped it would not take long. He wanted to go home to his quiet apartment. David walked into the hotel. The music was loud and people were everywhere. He smiled and shook hands with people he had met many times before. They all said the same things. They talked about business and money and success. No one ever asked him how he really felt. "David." "There you are," called out Mr. Peterson, a man who owned several hotels. "I have been waiting to talk to you about a new project." David smiled and nodded, but inside he felt tired. It was always the same. People only wanted to talk to him when they needed something. They never really wanted to know him as a person. As Mr. Peterson talked about his new project, David's eyes moved around the room. He saw the beautiful flowers and expensive decorations. He saw people in fancy clothes drinking wine and laughing too loud. And then he saw something that made him stop listening to Mr. Peterson. In the corner of the room was a beautiful black piano. It was a real grand piano, the kind David had dreamed of playing when he was young, the kind he had played before his life became all about business and money. David had not thought about pianos for a long time. When he was a child, he had loved music more than anything else. His mother had found him a piano teacher when he was 7 years old. By the time he was 15, his teacher said he was good enough to study music in college. But David's father had other ideas. "Music is not a real job," his father had said. "You need to study business. You need to make money. Music is just a hobby for rich people." So David had studied business in college. He was good at it, but it never made him happy the way music had. He had not played piano for almost 10 years now. Sometimes late at night in his apartment, he would remember the feeling of his fingers on the keys, but he tried not to think about it too much. "David, are you listening to me?" Mr. Peterson asked. "Sorry, yes, of course," David said quickly. But his eyes kept looking at the piano. "As I was saying, we could make a lot of money together," Mr. Peterson continued. David nodded and made the right sounds, but he was not really listening. He was thinking about the last time he had played piano. It was at his grandmother's house before she died. She had always loved to hear him play. She was the only one in his family who understood his love for music. After Mr. Peterson finally walked away, David moved closer to the piano. No one was playing it. It just sat there like a beautiful decoration. This made David feel sad. Pianos were meant to be played, not just looked at. He remembered how it felt to make music. When he played piano, he could forget about everything else. He could express feelings that he could not put into words. Music was like a language that spoke directly to his heart. David Chen. "I have been looking everywhere for you," called out Mrs. Williams, a woman who organized charity events. She wanted to talk about giving money to her new project. David talked to Mrs. Williams, but part of his mind stayed with the piano. He watched the people walking past it. None of them seemed to notice how beautiful it was. They were all too busy talking about business and gossip. As the evening went on, David talked to many people. They all wanted the same things from him: money, business deals, connections to other rich people. No one asked him about his hobbies or his dreams. No one seemed to care about David the person, only David the businessman. During a quiet moment, David found himself standing near the piano again. He looked at the keys and remembered a song his grandmother had loved. She would always ask him to play it when he visited her. It was a simple song, but it had meant everything to her. David reached out his hand toward the keys, then stopped. What would people think if they saw him playing piano? They would think it was strange. Rich businessmen did not play piano at parties. They talked about money and made deals. A waiter walked past carrying a tray of glasses. David watched him work. The waiter looked tired but focused on his job. He was probably working hard to pay for something important. David had almost forgotten what it felt like to work for something you really wanted. "Sir, would you like another drink?" asked a young woman in a black uniform. She was carrying a tray and looked tired but still smiled politely. "No, thank you," David said. As she walked away, he noticed something different about her. When she passed the piano, she slowed down a little. She looked at it the way David had been looking at it, like it meant something special to her. David watched the young woman as she worked. She moved gracefully between the guests, always polite and professional. But when she thought no one was looking, her eyes would return to the piano. David could see something in her face that he recognized. It was love. Love for music. This made David curious. In a room full of people who seemed to care only about money and status, here was someone who looked at the piano the way he used to look at pianos. Someone who saw it as more than just decoration. The evening was getting late, but David stayed near the piano. He wanted to see if the young woman would come back. He had a feeling that she understood something about music that all the rich people in the room had forgotten. David did not know that tomorrow would bring an unexpected conversation. He did not know that someone would soon ask him a question that would remind him who he used to be. Tonight he was just a tired businessman, standing next to a silent piano, remembering what it felt like to love music. The next evening, Maria returned to the Grand Hotel for another catering job. It was a smaller party this time, but still fancy. Rich people filled the same beautiful room, talking and laughing just like the night before. Maria wore her black uniform again and carried her heavy tray. Her feet still hurt from yesterday, but she tried not to think about it. She needed to focus on her work so she could earn enough money for next month's music lessons. The same beautiful piano sat in the corner. Maria looked at it as she walked past with dirty plates. It still sat there silent and alone, like a bird that had forgotten how to sing. This made her heart feel heavy. During her first break, Maria sat in the kitchen with the other workers. Carmen was there again, along with two new people Maria had never met before. "That piano out there is so beautiful," Maria said to Carmen. "I wish someone would play it. Why don't you ask someone?" Carmen suggested. "Maybe one of those rich people knows how to play." "I could never do that," Maria said quickly. "It's not my place to ask. I'm just here to work." "Honey, there's nothing wrong with asking a polite question," Carmen said kindly. "The worst thing they can say is no." Maria thought about this as she went back to work. Maybe Carmen was right. Maybe it would not hurt to ask someone if they could play piano. The music might make the evening more beautiful for everyone. As Maria worked, she looked at the guests more carefully. She tried to imagine which ones might know how to play piano. There was an older man with gray hair who looked like he might be musical. There was a woman in a blue dress who kept looking at the piano like Maria did, But Maria was too nervous to ask anyone. These people were so important and rich. What if they got angry at her for bothering them? What if they complained to her boss? She could lose her job. The evening went on and Maria kept working. She carried trays and cleaned tables and smiled at the guests. But she kept thinking about the piano and wondering what it would sound like if someone played it. Near the end of the party, Maria was cleaning glasses at a table near the piano. Most of the guests had moved to the other side of the room where there was dancing. Only a few people were left in the piano corner. That was when she saw him. A young man in an expensive black suit standing very close to the piano. He was looking at it the same way Maria looked at it, with love and longing in his eyes. His hand was reaching toward the keys, but he stopped himself before touching them. Maria watched him carefully. Something about him was different from the other guests. He looked sad and tired, even though he was at a fancy party. When he looked at the piano, his whole face changed. It became soft and peaceful. Maria made a decision. Her heart was beating fast, but she walked over to the young man. She took a deep breath and spoke quietly. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely. The young man turned to look at her. His eyes were kind but surprised. "Yes?" "I'm sorry to bother you," Maria continued, her voice shaking a little. "I noticed you looking at the piano. Do you play?" David was shocked. No one at these parties ever asked him personal questions. They only wanted to talk about business. This young woman in the catering uniform was asking him about something he had not talked about in years. I used to," David said slowly. "A long time ago." "Would you consider playing something?" Maria asked hopefully. "I know it's not my place to ask, but I love music so much. And the other workers, we've been here since early morning. Music always makes hard work feel easier." David stared at her. She was asking him to play piano. Not because she knew he was rich. Not because she wanted something from his company. She was asking because she loved music and thought it might make people happy. "You want me to play for the workers?" David asked, making sure he understood. "Yes, sir. If you don't mind," Maria said. "I know we're just the help, but we love music too. And that piano is so beautiful. It seems sad to see it sitting there silent all evening." David looked at Maria's face. Her eyes were bright with hope. She was looking at him like music was the most important thing in the world. When was the last time someone had looked at him that way? "What kind of music do you like?" David asked. Maria's face lit up with joy. "Oh, I love all kinds. Classical music, jazz, anything beautiful. I'm studying piano at the community college. I dream of being a music teacher someday." "You study piano?" David asked with surprise. "Yes, sir. I practice every day on an old piano at the community center. Some of the keys don't work very well, but it's better than nothing," Maria explained. David felt something he had not felt in years. Here was someone who understood what music meant. Someone who practiced on a broken piano because she loved it so much. Someone who saw a beautiful piano and wanted to hear it make music, not just look pretty. "I haven't played in a very long time," David said quietly. "That's okay," Maria said gently. "Music never leaves you. It just waits inside until you're ready." These words touched David's heart. His grandmother used to say something similar. "Music lives in your fingers," she would say. "Even when you stop playing, it's still there." David looked around the room. Most guests were on the other side, busy with their conversations. The workers were cleaning up quietly, getting ready to finish their long day. No one was paying attention to the piano corner. "What would you like to hear?" David asked. Maria's eyes grew wide with excitement. "Anything you want to play, sir. Whatever feels right to you." David walked to the piano bench and sat down slowly. His hands shook a little as he lifted the cover from the keys. The piano was even more beautiful up close. The keys were perfect, white and black in their eternal pattern. He placed his fingers on the keys and felt a rush of memories. All the hours of practice as a child, all the songs he had learned and loved, all the dreams he had put away when he chose business over music. "I'm not sure I remember how," David said nervously. "Just try," Maria said softly. "Music is like breathing. You never really forget." David pressed one key gently. The sound was pure and beautiful. Then he pressed another and another. Slowly, a melody began to form. It was simple at first, just notes finding each other like old friends. Maria stood very still, hardly breathing. She could see that this man really knew how to play. His fingers moved with skill and grace, even though he said he was out of practice. The music that came from the piano was not just notes. It was feeling and memory and something beautiful that had been waiting to come out. As David played, other people began to notice. Some of the workers stopped cleaning to listen. A few guests turned their heads toward the piano corner. But David did not see them. He only saw the keys and felt the music flowing through his fingers. For the first time in years, David felt like himself again. Not David the businessman. Not David the millionaire. Just David making music because it made him happy. Maria watched with tears in her eyes. This was what she had hoped for. This was why she had been brave enough to ask. The beautiful piano was finally singing, and its song filled the room with something magical. Neither David nor Maria knew that this moment would change both of their lives. They only knew that right now, in this moment, music was bringing two different worlds together through the simple power of a question asked with love. David's fingers found their way to a song he had not played in 10 years. It was Chopin's Ballade No. 1, a piece his grandmother had loved more than any other. As his hands moved across the keys, he felt like he was coming home after a long journey. The music started soft and gentle, like whispers in the wind. David's touch was careful at first, testing each note to make sure he remembered correctly. But as the melody grew, so did his confidence. The music began to flow from his hands like water from a spring. Maria stood perfectly still, afraid to move and break the magic. She had heard this piece before in her music classes, but never like this. This man was not just playing the notes. He was telling a story with his hands, painting pictures with sound. The piano responded to David's touch like it had been waiting for him all its life. Every note was clear and perfect. The melody danced and sang, sometimes quiet like a lullaby, sometimes strong like thunder. David's whole body moved with the music, swaying gently as his fingers flew across the keys. Other people in the room began to notice. A waiter stopped in the middle of carrying a tray and turned toward the piano. A woman in a red dress paused her conversation and looked over with surprise. One by one, the guests and workers turned their attention to the music, but David did not see them. He was lost in the music, in memories of his grandmother's small living room where he used to play this same song. He could almost see her sitting in her favorite chair, smiling and nodding along with the melody. The music grew more complex as David's memory returned. His left hand played deep, rich bass notes while his right hand danced through the melody. The two hands worked together like dancers, sometimes joining together, sometimes playing against each other in beautiful harmony. Maria had never heard anyone play like this in person. At school, she had listened to recordings of famous pianists, but this was different. This was real and alive, happening right in front of her. She could see the emotion on David's face as he played. She could feel the music moving through her own body. As the piece continued, more people stopped what they were doing to listen. The conversations around the room grew quieter. Even people who knew nothing about classical music could tell they were hearing something special. Carmen, the older woman from the kitchen, appeared at Maria's side. She had tears in her eyes as she listened to the beautiful music. "You did this," Carmen whispered to Maria. "You asked him to play." Maria nodded, too moved to speak. She watched David's hands create magic on the keyboard. This was what music was supposed to be. This was why she studied so hard and worked so many jobs to pay for her lessons. Music could touch people's hearts in ways that words never could. The middle section of the piece became darker and more dramatic. David's hands moved faster, creating sounds like rain on a roof, like wind through trees. His face showed deep concentration as he worked through the difficult passages. Years of not playing had not made him forget. The music was still there inside him, as strong as ever. A small crowd had gathered around the piano now. Rich guests in expensive clothes stood next to tired workers in simple uniforms. Everyone was equal in front of the music. Everyone was touched by the beauty David was creating. Mr. Peterson, the hotel owner who had talked to David the night before, stood with his mouth open in surprise. He had known David was successful in business, but he had no idea the young man could play piano like a professional musician. "Incredible," someone whispered. "Where did he learn to play like that?" asked another person. But David heard none of their comments. He was completely focused on the music. As the piece moved toward its climax, his playing became more powerful and emotional. The piano filled the room with sound that seemed to make the walls vibrate. Maria watched David's face as he played the most difficult part of the piece. She could see that this music meant everything to him. It was not just notes and rhythms. It was his heart speaking through his fingers. The workers had stopped all their cleaning to listen. They stood holding their trays and towels, completely absorbed in the performance. Some had never heard classical music before, but they could feel its power. As the piece built to its final section, David played with such intensity that it seemed like the piano might not be able to contain all the music inside it. His hands moved across the entire keyboard, creating sounds that ranged from thunder to whispers. Then suddenly, the music became soft again. The final section was like a gentle goodbye, a peaceful ending to an emotional journey. David's touch became light and delicate as he guided the music to its conclusion. The last notes hung in the air like the final words of a beautiful poem. David's hands remained on the keys for a moment after the music ended, as if he was not ready to let it go. The room was completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath, afraid to break the spell that David's music had cast over them. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. Others joined in, and soon the entire room was filled with applause. People clapped harder and longer than they usually did at these fancy parties. This had been something real and beautiful, not just polite entertainment. David looked up from the piano as if he was waking from a dream. He seemed surprised to see so many people watching him. He had been so lost in the music that he had forgotten where he was. Maria was clapping with tears streaming down her face. She had never heard anything so beautiful in her life. This man had taken her simple request and turned it into something magical. David stood up from the piano bench slowly. His hands were shaking a little and his face was flushed with emotion. He looked around at all the people staring at him with admiration and surprise. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the continuing applause. He looked at Maria, the young woman who had asked him to play. She was smiling at him with such joy and gratitude that it made his heart feel warm. When was the last time someone had looked at him like that? When was the last time he had felt this alive? "That was beautiful, sir," Maria said when the applause finally died down. "Thank you so much." David nodded, still feeling overwhelmed by what had just happened. He had not realized how much he had missed playing piano until this moment. The music had awakened something inside him that he thought was gone forever. As people began to return to their conversations, David remained standing by the piano. He looked down at his hands, amazed that they still remembered how to create such beauty. Maria stayed nearby, not wanting this moment to end. She had so many questions for this mysterious man who played like an angel, but she also knew that some moments were too precious for many words. Neither of them knew that this performance would lead to conversations that would change everything. For now, they just stood in the afterglow of beautiful music, two people brought together by a love for something greater than themselves. After the applause died down, most of the guests returned to their conversations, but David remained standing by the piano, his heart still racing from the performance. He could not believe what had just happened. He had not felt this alive in years. Maria stayed nearby, cleaning glasses from a table but stealing glances at David. She wanted to thank him again, but she was not sure if she should interrupt his thoughts. He looked like a man who had just remembered something very important about himself. Finally, David noticed Maria working quietly near him. He walked over to her with a gentle smile. "Thank you," he said softly, "for asking me to play. I had forgotten how much I missed it." "Oh no, sir, thank you," Maria replied, her eyes bright with happiness. "That was the most beautiful music I have ever heard in person. You play like you have music living in your soul." David was touched by her words. "What did you say your name was?" "I didn't say, sir, but it's Maria Rodriguez." "I'm David," he said, then paused. He almost never introduced himself without mentioning his company or his success, but something about Maria made him want to be just David, the person who loved music. "It's nice to meet you, David," Maria said with a warm smile. "Are you a professional pianist?" "You must have studied for many years to play like that." David felt a familiar sadness wash over him. "I did study for many years, but I'm not a professional musician. I gave up that dream a long time ago." "Gave up?" Maria looked confused. "But you have such incredible talent. Why would you give up music?" David was quiet for a moment. He had never talked about this with anyone, especially not with someone he had just met. But something about Maria's genuine curiosity made him want to share. "My family thought music was not a practical career," David explained. They said I needed to focus on business, on making money. They said music was just a hobby for rich people who didn't need to work. But music is work, Maria said passionately. It's the most important work there is. Music touches people's hearts. It makes the world more beautiful. How is that not important? David stared at her. No one in his family or business world had ever talked about music this way. To them, success meant money and status, not beauty or touching hearts. You really believe that? David asked. Of course I do, Maria said firmly. Music is why I work 3 jobs to pay for my lessons. Music is why I practice every day on a broken piano. Music is the most real thing in my life. 3 jobs? David asked with concern. Yes. I work here at the hotel 2 nights a week. I clean offices in the mornings, and I work at a coffee shop on weekends. It's the only way I can afford to study music and pay my rent. David was amazed. Here was someone who worked harder than anyone he knew, just for the chance to study music. Meanwhile, he had given up his musical dreams because his rich family thought it was impractical. What kind of music do you study? David asked. Classical piano mostly. I love Chopin, like the piece you just played. I also study some jazz and contemporary pieces. My teacher says I have potential, but I need more practice on better instruments. The piano at your school is not good? We don't have a piano at school, Maria explained. I practice at the community center, but their piano is very old. Half the keys stick and some don't make sound at all. But it's free, so I'm grateful for it. David thought about his apartment where he had a beautiful grand piano that he never touched. It had been a gift from his parents when he started his company, meant to be decoration for his successful lifestyle. While Maria practiced on broken keys, his perfect piano sat silent and unused. Tell me about your teacher, David said, genuinely interested. Professor Martinez. She's wonderful, but she's getting old and may retire soon. She only charges me half price for lessons because she says she believes in my dream. Without her, I could never afford to learn. As Maria talked about her music studies, her whole face lit up. David could see the same passion in her eyes that he used to feel when he was young and dreamed of being a concert pianist. What do you want to do after you finish studying? David asked. I want to teach music to children, Maria said with excitement. I want to help kids discover the joy of making music. Too many children never get the chance to learn because their families can't afford lessons. I want to change that. David was moved by her dreams. While he had been forced to abandon music for money, Maria was willing to be poor just for the chance to share music with others. That sounds like a beautiful goal, David said sincerely. What about you? Maria asked. What do you do when you're not playing piano beautifully at parties? David hesitated. How could he explain his world of business meetings and money deals to someone who had such pure dreams about music? I work in technology, he said simply. I help develop applications for computers and phones. That sounds interesting too, Maria said politely, though David could tell she was much more excited talking about music than hearing about his work. They talked for several more minutes about music, about different composers they both loved, about the feeling of sitting at a piano and making something beautiful. David had not had a conversation like this in years. Maria understood things about music that none of his business associates could ever understand. I should get back to work, Maria said reluctantly, looking around at the other workers who were finishing their cleaning duties. Of course, David said, not wanting the conversation to end. Maria, would you like to have coffee sometime? To talk more about music? Maria looked surprised and pleased. You would want to do that? Very much, David said honestly. I haven't talked to anyone about music in a long time. It feels good to remember that part of myself. I would love that, Maria said with a genuine smile. But are you sure? I mean, you seem like you come from a very different world than me. Music makes us not so different, David replied. When you love something as much as we both love music, other differences don't matter so much. Maria wrote her phone number on a piece of paper from her uniform pocket. I work most evenings, but I'm free on Sunday afternoons. Sunday afternoon would be perfect, David said, taking the paper carefully. There's a quiet cafe near downtown. We can talk about music and maybe you can tell me more about what you're studying. I'd like that very much, Maria said. As Maria returned to her work, David remained by the piano. He looked down at the keys that had just helped him reconnect with a part of himself he thought was lost. Then he looked at the piece of paper with Maria's number on it. For the first time in years, David was looking forward to something that had nothing to do with business or money. He was looking forward to talking with someone who understood that music was not just a hobby or decoration, but a way of touching something beautiful and true in the world. David did not yet know that Maria was struggling to pay for her education, or that she might have to drop out of school if she could not find more money soon. Maria did not know that David was one of the richest young men in the city, or that he had the power to change her life with a simple decision. All they both knew was that music had brought them together, and that felt like the beginning of something important. Sunday afternoon came quickly. Maria wore her best dress, a simple blue one that she had bought at a second-hand store. She was nervous about meeting David for coffee, but also excited. It had been a long time since anyone had wanted to talk to her about music for hours. The cafe David had suggested was in a nice part of town. Maria had to take 2 buses to get there, but she didn't mind. She arrived a few minutes early and waited outside, watching well-dressed people walk by with expensive bags and cars. David arrived exactly on time, driving a car that Maria recognized as very expensive. He was dressed casually in nice jeans and a sweater, but Maria could tell his clothes cost more than she made in a month. "Maria, I'm so glad you could come," David said with a warm smile as he got out of his car. "Thank you for inviting me," Maria replied, suddenly feeling nervous about her simple dress and old shoes. They went inside the cafe and found a quiet table near the window. David ordered an expensive coffee drink, while Maria asked for just regular coffee with milk. She was being careful with her money, as always. "Tell me more about your music studies," David said after they sat down. "What are you working on right now?" Maria's nervousness disappeared as she began talking about her favorite subject. She told David about the pieces she was learning, about her struggles with difficult passages, and about her dreams of performing someday. "My teacher says I need to practice at least 4 hours a day to really improve," Maria explained. "But it's hard when I can only use the community center piano a few hours a week. Other people need to practice too, and we all share the same broken piano." "That must be frustrating," David said, thinking again about his unused piano at home. "It is, but I try not to complain. At least I have somewhere to practice. Some of my classmates don't even have that much." They talked for over an hour about music, about different composers, about the feeling of performing for other people. David shared stories about his childhood lessons and his old dreams of being a concert pianist. Maria listened with fascination, amazed at how much formal training David had received. "You must have had wonderful teachers," Maria said. "I can tell from the way you play that you learned from the best." "I was very lucky," David admitted. "My family could afford to give me every advantage. Private lessons, master classes, even a piano of my own." "You have your own piano?" Maria asked with wonder. "What's it like to be able to practice whenever you want?" David felt uncomfortable. "Actually, I don't play much anymore. The piano mostly just sits there, but why?" Maria asked, confused. "If I had my own piano, I would play it every single day." Before David could answer, a group of well-dressed people walked into the cafe. One of them, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, noticed David right away. "David Chen, what a surprise to see you here," the man called out loudly. David's face changed immediately. He looked worried and uncomfortable. "Hello, Mr. Harrison," he said politely. Mr. Harrison walked over to their table with a big smile. "I was just telling my wife about your company's latest success. That new app of yours is making millions, isn't it?" Maria looked confused. She stared at David, then at Mr. Harrison, trying to understand what was happening. "David Chen, the tech millionaire," Mr. Harrison continued enthusiastically. "His company is one of the most successful in the city." "Worth what now, David? 50 million? More?" Maria felt like the world had suddenly stopped spinning. "Millionaire?" David was a millionaire. She looked at him with shock and growing embarrassment. "I'm sorry, I should let you get back to your meeting," Mr. Harrison said, finally noticing Maria's confused expression. "Nice to see you, David. We should talk soon about that investment opportunity." After Mr. Harrison walked away, the table fell completely silent. Maria stared down at her hands, her face red with embarrassment. David looked miserable. "Maria, I can explain." David started quietly. "You're a millionaire," Maria said, still not looking up. "A real millionaire, and I asked you to play piano like you were entertainment for the staff." "That's not how it was," David said desperately. "You asked me because you love music, not because of money." "I'm so embarrassed," Maria whispered. "I treated you like you were just another guest." I had no idea who you were. That's exactly why I liked talking to you, David said urgently. You were the first person in years to see me as just David, not David the businessman or David the millionaire. Maria finally looked up at him, and her eyes were full of hurt and confusion. But you didn't tell me the truth. You let me talk about my 3 jobs and my broken piano and my money problems, and you never said anything. I didn't want you to see me differently, David explained. Everyone treats me differently when they know about the money. They want things from me, or they feel uncomfortable around me, or they act fake. You were real with me. Real? Maria said, her voice getting louder. You want to talk about real? I told you I work 3 jobs to pay for music lessons. I told you I practice on a broken piano. I ordered the cheapest coffee on the menu because I'm worried about spending too much money, and all this time you could probably buy the entire music school I go to. Other people in the cafe were starting to look at them. David wished he could disappear. I'm sorry, Maria, I should have told you who I was from the beginning. Why didn't you? Maria asked, and now she sounded more sad than angry. Did you think I would try to use you for your money? No, that's not it, David said quickly. I was afraid you would stop being yourself around me. I was afraid you would start acting like everyone else does. Maria sat back in her chair, looking at David like she was seeing him for the first time. So who are you really? Are you David the musician who misses playing piano? Or are you David the millionaire who owns a piano he doesn't use? I'm both, David said honestly. And I'm also David the person who hasn't had a real conversation about music in 10 years until I met you. Maria was quiet for a long time, thinking. She felt embarrassed and confused, but she also felt something else. She remembered how David had looked when he played piano, how his whole face had come alive with joy. That had been real even if he hadn't told her about the money. Your piano, Maria said finally. The one that just sits there. Is it a good piano? It's a Steinway Grand, David admitted quietly. One of the best pianos money can buy. Maria closed her eyes, imagining what it would feel like to play on such an instrument. Then she opened them and looked directly at David. I don't know how I feel about you not telling me the truth, she said slowly, but I do know that when you played at the hotel, that was the most honest thing I've seen in a long time. Rich or poor, you're still the person who made that beautiful music. I am, David said gratefully. That part was completely real. I need to think about all this, Maria said, standing up from the table. This is a lot to understand. Can we talk again? David asked hopefully. Please don't let my money ruin the connection we found through music. Maria looked at him for a long moment. I don't know, David. Everything feels different now. I need time to figure out what's real and what's not. As Maria walked away from the cafe, David sat alone at the table feeling worse than he had in years. He had finally found someone who understood his love for music, and his own dishonesty had ruined it. Maria walked to the bus stop with tears in her eyes. She felt foolish and confused, but also strangely hopeful. If David really was as wealthy as that man had said, maybe he could help her achieve her musical dreams. But she also felt angry at herself for thinking that way. She didn't want to be the kind of person who saw others as opportunities. Neither of them knew that this painful moment of truth would actually lead to something more honest and real than either had experienced before. Sometimes the most important relationships begin with disappointment and confusion, but grow into something stronger because they are built on truth instead of pretense. For 3 days, Maria could not stop thinking about David. She went to work, attended her music classes, and practiced on the broken piano at the community center. But her mind kept returning to their conversation at the cafe. She felt angry, embarrassed, and confused all at the same time. How could she have been so foolish? How could she not have realized that someone who played piano like a professional and wore expensive clothes was probably very wealthy? But the more she thought about it, the more she remembered the look on David's face when he played piano. That had been real emotion, real love for music. Money could not fake that kind of passion. On Wednesday evening, Maria was practicing at the community center when her phone rang. She saw David's name on the screen and almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up the call. Hello, Maria. David's voice was quiet and uncertain. I hope you don't mind that I called. I told you I needed time to think, Maria said, but her voice was not angry. I know, and I respect that. I just wanted to ask you something, and then I'll leave you alone if that's what you want. Maria was quiet, waiting for him to continue. Would you consider giving me piano lessons? David asked. What? Maria was completely surprised by this request. I know it sounds strange asking you to teach me when I probably have more technical training than you do, but you have something I lost a long time ago. You have pure love for music, without all the pressure and expectations that I grew up with. I want to learn how to feel music the way you do. Maria didn't know what to say. David, you play better than I do. What could I possibly teach you? You could teach me how to play with joy again, David said simply. When I watched you look at that piano at the hotel, you looked at it like it was the most beautiful thing in the world. I used to feel that way, but I forgot how. Maybe you could help me remember. Maria was touched by the honesty in his voice. I still don't understand why you didn't tell me about your money. Because I wanted you to know me as a person first before you knew me as a rich person, David explained. Every relationship in my life is complicated by money. People either want something from me or they're intimidated by what I have, or they act fake around me. You were the first person in years to treat me like just another human being who loves music. But I embarrassed myself completely, Maria said. I talked about my money problems to someone who could buy and sell everything I own. Your problems are real even if I have money, David said gently. Your struggles are valid. Your hard work matters. The fact that I have money doesn't make your life easier or your dreams less important. Maria was quiet for a moment, thinking about his words. Maria, I have an idea. But I want you to hear me out before you say no, David continued. What kind of idea? I want to offer you something, but not as charity, as a business arrangement between musicians. I'm listening, Maria said carefully. I will pay for the rest of your music education at the conservatory. All tuition, books, everything you need. In exchange, you give me piano lessons twice a week and you practice on my piano whenever you want. You'd be helping me rediscover my love for music while you finish your studies. Maria was shocked. David, that's too much. The conservatory costs thousands of dollars. For you, it's thousands of dollars. For me, it's less than what I spend on my car each month. But more importantly, it's an investment in someone with real talent and passion for music. I don't know, Maria said, feeling overwhelmed. It feels like charity even if you call it something else. Then let me make you another offer, David said. Come to my apartment tomorrow evening. See my piano. Play it for just 1 hour. If you can honestly tell me afterward that you don't want to practice on it every day, I'll never mention this arrangement again. But if you love it as much as I think you will, then consider my offer seriously. Maria thought about the broken piano at the community center, with its sticky keys and missing sounds. She thought about her 3 jobs and her tired feet and her worry about paying for next semester's classes. Just to try your piano? She asked. Just to try it. No pressure, no strings attached. You play for an hour and then you decide what you want to do. Okay, Maria said finally. I'll come try your piano. Thank you, David said, and she could hear the relief in his voice. I'll send you my address. The next evening, Maria took 2 buses to reach David's apartment building. It was in the most expensive part of the city, surrounded by fancy restaurants and designer shops. The doorman led her into a lobby that looked like a palace, with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. David's apartment was on the 20th floor. When he opened the door, Maria could see immediately that he was indeed very wealthy. The apartment was huge, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the entire city. But Maria barely noticed the expensive furniture or the beautiful view. In the center of the main room sat the most magnificent piano she had ever seen. It was a black Steinway grand piano, so perfect it looked like it belonged in a concert hall. Oh my God, Maria whispered, walking toward it slowly. Go ahead, David said softly. Try it. Maria sat down on the bench and lifted her hands to the keys. The moment she touched them, she knew she had never felt anything like this before. The keys responded to her touch like they were reading her mind. Every note was pure and perfect, with rich sound that filled the entire room. She played a simple scale just to feel how the piano responded. Then she played a Mozart piece she knew by heart. The piano made her playing sound better than she had ever imagined possible. Tears began to flow down Maria's face as she played. This was what music was supposed to sound like. This was what she had been dreaming of every time she struggled with the broken keys at the community center. She played for much longer than an hour. She played everything she knew, every piece she had been working on, every song that came into her heart. David sat quietly in a chair across the room, watching her discover what it felt like to play on a perfect instrument. When Maria finally stopped playing, she sat with her hands in her lap, still crying softly. "How can you own this piano and not play it every day?" she asked David. "Because I forgot how much music means to me," David said honestly. "Until I met you." Maria turned around on the bench to face him. "Your offer. The one about paying for my education in exchange for lessons. Did you really mean it?" "Every word," David said. "It still feels like too much," Maria said. "Like charity." "Then think of it this way," David said. "You would be saving me. I've been living like music doesn't exist. Like that part of me died when I chose business over art. You could help me find my way back to the person I used to be. That's worth more to me than any amount of money." Maria looked back at the beautiful piano, then at David. She saw the longing in his eyes, the same longing she felt every time she had to leave the community center piano. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "we do this as equals. I'm not your charity case and you're not my savior. We're two musicians helping each other." "Agreed," David said immediately. "And I pay you back somehow, someday, when I'm a music teacher making my own money. If that's what you need to feel comfortable, then yes." Maria stood up from the piano bench and walked over to David. She held out her hand to shake his. "Partners?" she asked. "Partners," David agreed, shaking her hand. Neither of them could have imagined how much their lives were about to change. They had found each other through music, lost each other through misunderstanding, and now found each other again through honesty and mutual respect. The beautiful piano would no longer sit silent. Maria would no longer have to struggle alone with broken keys and unpaid bills. And David would begin to remember that success without passion is just an empty achievement. Their real story was just beginning. 3 months later, Maria stood backstage at the conservatory concert hall, wearing a beautiful black dress that David had helped her choose. Tonight was her senior recital, the most important performance of her student career. Her hands were shaking with nervousness, but her heart was full of excitement. In those 3 months, everything in Maria's life had changed. She no longer worked 3 jobs. Instead, she spent her days studying music and practicing on David's magnificent piano. Her playing had improved dramatically with access to a perfect instrument and no financial stress. David had kept his word about their arrangement. He paid for her final semester at the conservatory, but he never made her feel like she owed him anything beyond their agreed-upon piano lessons. Those lessons had become the highlight of both their weeks. Twice a week, Maria went to David's apartment to teach him. But the lessons were nothing like traditional piano instruction. Instead, they explored music together like two friends discovering a new language. Maria taught David how to play with feeling instead of just technique. She showed him how to listen to the emotion in a piece of music and let that emotion guide his hands. David taught Maria about the technical aspects of piano that she had never learned, helping her understand the structure behind the beauty. Most importantly, they both learned that music was meant to be shared. David began playing piano again for the pure joy of it, not because anyone expected him to. Maria learned that accepting help was not the same as being weak, and that sometimes the most generous thing you can do is let someone help you achieve your dreams. Their friendship had grown into something deeper than either had expected. They were not romantic partners, but they were true companions in music and life. They understood each other in ways that no one else could. David had also made changes in his business life. He started a foundation that provided music education scholarships to students who could not afford lessons. Maria helped him design the program, making sure it reached the kids who needed it most. Now, as Maria prepared for her recital, she felt ready to share everything she had learned. The program would include pieces by Mozart, Chopin, and Debussy. But the final piece would be special, a duet that she and David had chosen to perform together. 5 minutes. "Maria!" called the stage manager. Maria took a deep breath and walked to the wings of the stage. She could see the audience through the curtain. The small concert hall was packed with students, teachers, and families. In the third row, she spotted David sitting next to Professor Martinez, her elderly teacher who had believed in her from the beginning. David caught her eye and gave her an encouraging smile. He looked nervous too, which made Maria feel better. They were in this together. The curtain opened and Maria walked onto the stage. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience, but she could feel their attention and support. She sat at the piano bench and placed her hands on the familiar keys. She began with Mozart's Sonata in A major, playing with the technical precision David had helped her develop and the emotional expression that came naturally to her. The music flowed from her fingers like water, each note clear and purposeful. As she played, Maria thought about her journey to this moment. She remembered the broken piano at the community center, her exhaustion from working 3 jobs, and her fear that she might never achieve her dreams. But she also remembered the moment she first asked David to play piano, not knowing that simple question would change both their lives. The Mozart piece ended to enthusiastic applause. Maria moved on to Chopin's Ballade No. 1, the same piece David had played at the hotel that first night. As she performed it, she felt connected to David and to every musician who had ever played these notes with love and dedication. The Debussy piece was light and impressionistic, like painting with sound. Maria had learned to love this style of music through her studies, and she played it with the confidence of someone who truly understood what the composer was trying to express. Then came the moment she and David had been preparing for. David walked onto the stage carrying his music folder, looking elegant in his black tuxedo. The audience seemed surprised to see him. This was supposed to be Maria's recital. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maria said into the microphone, "I would like to share the final piece with my friend and musical partner, David Chen. 3 months ago, he reminded me that music is meant to be shared, and tonight we want to share with you a piece that represents our friendship and our mutual love for this beautiful art." They had chosen to play Schubert's Fantasia in F minor for 4 hands, a piece written for 2 pianists at 1 piano. It required perfect coordination and trust between the performers. Maria and David sat side by side on the expanded piano bench. They looked at each other and nodded, then began to play. The music was complex and beautiful, with each pianist playing both melody and accompaniment at different times. As they played, Maria felt the same magic she had felt that first night at the hotel. This was what music was supposed to be. 2 people creating something beautiful together, something neither could create alone. The audience was mesmerized. They had never seen anything quite like this before. A student and a businessman, a young woman from a poor family and a wealthy tech entrepreneur, playing as perfect equals, united by their shared love of music. When the last notes faded away, the audience erupted in the loudest applause Maria had ever heard. People stood up, clapping and shouting bravo. Professor Martinez was crying with pride. Even some of the other students had tears in their eyes. Maria and David stood together, holding hands and bowing to the audience. As they looked out at all the smiling faces, Maria realized that her dream had come true, but not in the way she had expected. She had wanted to become a great pianist, and she was well on her way to achieving that goal. But more importantly, she had learned that music was not just about individual achievement. It was about connection, about bringing people together, about creating beauty that could touch other people's hearts. After the recital, there was a reception in the conservatory lobby. Students, teachers, and family members gathered around Maria and David, congratulating them on their performance. Many people wanted to know more about their partnership and how they had come to perform together. Professor Martinez pulled Maria aside with tears of joy in her eyes. "I have been teaching for 40 years, she said, "and I have never been more proud of a student. You have found your voice as a musician, but more than that, you have found a way to use music to build bridges between people." David was surrounded by people asking about his foundation and his return to music. He handled the attention gracefully, but Maria could see that what made him happiest was not the praise, but the fact that he was talking about music again, sharing his passion with others. Later that evening, after all the guests had gone home, Maria and David sat in his apartment at the piano that had brought them together. They were both still dressed in their formal concert clothes, but they were relaxed and happy. "Thank you," Maria said quietly, "for everything, for believing in my dream when I almost gave up on it myself." "Thank you for asking me to play piano that first night," David replied. "You saved me from forgetting who I really am." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both thinking about how much their lives had changed. "What happens now?" Maria asked. "I graduate next month. I'll start looking for a teaching job." "The foundation is growing," David said. "We could use someone to run the scholarship program. someone who understands what it's like to struggle for music education. Interested? Maria smiled. Very interested. But I still want to teach children too. The job would involve setting up music programs in schools that can't afford them. You'd be teaching hundreds of children, not just a few. Maria's eyes lit up with excitement. This was even better than what she had dreamed of. She could help kids like herself, kids whose families could not afford music lessons but who had the same love for music that she did. Partners again? David asked, holding out his hand. Partners always, Maria agreed, shaking his hand. As they sat at the piano that had witnessed their friendship grow from a simple request into a life-changing partnership, both Maria and David knew that their story was far from over. They had found each other through music, and music would continue to guide their path forward. Maria had learned that dreams can come true in unexpected ways, and that sometimes accepting help is the bravest thing you can do. David had learned that success without purpose is empty, and that the best investments are the ones you make in other people's dreams. Together, they would spend the rest of their lives making sure that other young musicians would have the chances they had found together. Their friendship, born from a simple question about piano music, would create opportunities for countless others to discover the joy and power of making music, and the beautiful piano would continue to sing, no longer silent and alone, but surrounded by the laughter and music of two friends who had learned that the most beautiful melodies are the ones we create together.